characters section, I'm going to have to blitz through this because this show has 20 primary characters. The 10 Rangers, Keeper, and 9 core villains. So I'm going to try to spend far less than a minute on each. The Red Ranger was Tyler Navarro, a good-spirited adventurer. Tyler's father disappeared when he was 8 years old, and he spent the next 10 years searching for him. That search continued through Dino Charge and into Supercharge, and he was sometimes a little impulsive about it. For example, the time that he wanted to risk swimming through a long, dangerous tunnel in order to get to the other side of a cave that his father had disappeared in. Tyler was adventurous and energetic, brave, and hopeful. He always held a lot of pride in being a Power Ranger and was very dedicated to that. We saw that from the very beginning, all the way through to the very last episode of Supercharge where he makes that declaration with pride. He could be a bit headstrong at times, and honestly, he didn't come off as incredibly intelligent, but he is a great addition to the legacy of the Red Rangers. For ease of segue, we'll now talk about James Navarro, Tyler's dad. 10 years before the events of the series, James found the Aqua Energem on an expedition, becoming the Aqua Ranger, and as far as I can tell, the first Dino Charge Power Ranger. Fury sensed or smelled or whatever it was the Energem and began pursuing him. Feeling that this put young Tyler in danger, James led Fury away from him and didn't see Tyler until 10 years later when he learned that he had found the Red Energem and become a Power Ranger himself. James's character was kind of frustrating to me because we never got to see enough of him. Most of what we got from the Aqua Ranger was original footage, but because of that, they kept shipping him off. There were a few scenes with James and Tyler where they got to bond again as father and son, and it was nice when that happened, but then he'd always have to go again. I didn't necessarily mind him going out and searching for things the team needed. That was a nice touch. I just wish he would have gotten to stay with Tyler longer in between. Riley Griffin, the Green Ranger, was really a big ball of informed attributes. He was smart. He was young. He was stubborn. A frustrating thing for me with Riley is that he was the one most often saddled with a sudden negative character trait in order to push an episode forward and give it some conflict. In Home Run Coda, his dreams of being a sports star pushed both himself and Coda away from their ranger duties. And in Forgive and Forget, he suddenly decided that it was okay to use his powers to put a bully in his place. However, he gave the Rangers a brain in the field, and his love of fencing and swordplay and things like that both helped him as a Ranger, and showed kids that being into things like that can be cool in modern times. It also gave him something to bond with Ivan with, and we often saw the two of them practicing together. Riley developed kind of a close friendship with Chase Randall, the Black Ranger. Chase was the classic lady killer, dating a new girl every week, totally obsessed with himself and his accomplishments. He had to learn to consider the feelings of others when he insulted Shelby for being into the NZ Boys, even though later we find out he has a friend that's a singer in the group, and it upset his Energem or something. It made him unable to use the fabulously orange Dino Armor X. Chase actually got a good bit of character development as the lady killer finally found a girlfriend, Kaylee. At first, he ends up losing her to his own alter ego, the Black Ranger, but after finding his way past that, it really helped the character settle down a bit. Also, as far as I can remember, Kaylee is the only civilian in either season who learned who any of the Rangers are. The Blue Ranger was Coda. Just Coda, because Coda was a caveman. Coda found the Blue Energem 100,000 years ago in his cave, but then fell into ice while saving his little brother from the dreaded CGI saber-toothed tiger, being found later by Kendall and Chase. Coda had a very strong character, but not much in the way of development. Early episodes focused on Coda would talk about how he hadn't made the adjustment yet to modern life and technology, but he had a good heart and he was brave. However, in Warg World, an episode near the very end of the series, Coda has a monologue where he says that he still hasn't adjusted to modern life and technology. Coda did have some great moments. Warg World was one of them. Another was When Evil Stirs, the debut episode of Dino Supercharge, where he had to face a fear of ice to somehow insta-strip out of his ranger suit in order to save the day. Overall, he was a great character. I was just hoping for a lot more development. On to Shelby Watkins, the Pink Ranger, and Tyler's really interest for the duration of the show. As I said last week, the writers did a really great job over 2 seasons building up that relationship, and then there was no payoff, there was no kiss, there was no I love you, so all of that work fell completely flat. However, Shelby might be my favorite out of this team of Rangers. She was intelligent, yet strong, determined, yet also vulnerable. That being said, there were a couple of bad moments for her that stick out in my mind. There was one early episode of Dino Charge where she nearly refused to participate in a plan to get the Terrazord back from Fury because she had to wear a large dress and heels. Also, her determination for what was right faded in the face of her bestie, Aaron, who had to nearly get killed by a monster in order to realize that you shouldn't steal credit from people, with Shelby never just telling her this. But in the end, Shelby was a really great, strong, intelligent character and a strong addition to the Pink Ranger line. Speaking of positive female role models, let's move on to Kendall Morgan. Kendall was the Miss Fairweather of the team at first, the Rangers' technical advisor, always having some kind of new weapon or invention ready to help the Rangers track down the Energems. Kendall was confident to the point of being dismissive, taking a while to accept help from people like Shelby and Riley. Kendall was a very successful woman, either owning or at least managing the Dinosaur Museum and taking care of all of its operations. And she was heroic, as her search for a new candidate for the Purple Ranger ended up leading her directly to herself. However, there were issues here as well. As I ranted several times throughout the series, it was frustrating that Kendall was often kept out of her own Zord, with other Rangers allowed to pilot it instead. Also, we got next to nothing on Kendall's backstory. One episode featuring Kendall's grandmother, which implied that she was raised by her. And even more importantly than that, we got absolutely nothing on how Keeper and Kendall met and began the quest to find the Energems. At some point in this story, it was just Keeper and Kendall, and I would have loved to have seen that. Early on, as Tyler fought Fury, he began to see a golden form trying to escape from him, and started to think that that might be his father, James. However, when that golden form did fully escape Fury, it turned out to be Ivan, a Knight of Xandar from 800 years in the past. Ivan bonded with the Gold Energem while escorting the kingdom's young prince, but was captured by Fury and held until the present day, when he gets the only truly different morpher on this team. Don't worry, Gosei has a simple explanation for that, and becomes the Gold Ranger. Ivan was kind of another walking attribute, very similar to Coda, actually. He was grace and dignity personified, but also kind of stuck up and set in his ways. He was heroic and brave, of course, being a knight, but using those knightly behaviors in the modern day led to some silly moments. He did adjust to modern living much more easily than Coda did, which makes a lot of sense, seeing as he was a lot closer to the modern day. Ivan was a Knight of Xandar, and the nation of Xandar transitions us over to the Graphite Ranger, Prince Philip III of Xandar. Philip at first was offended and aghast that the treasures of his country had been appropriated, and came to America to seize them back, including the Gold Energem, for his country. At first, Philip was very cold and snooty to the other Rangers, seeing them as beneath him. However, when Coda saves him, he starts to warm up to them a bit, and learning who the Rangers were made him nearly desperate to join them. Rise of a Ranger is a really great episode where we see someone who very desperately wants to be a Ranger and does everything they can to become one, before realizing that it just was not meant to be and accepting that with dignity. However, his heroic act earned him a place on the team, though again, we saw far too little of him as a part-time Ranger, since he had a country to run and all. It's a bird! It's a plane! No, wait, it's a bird. Xenowing, the Silver Ranger, is a giant blue bird man, who was actually the team's mentor in the Sentai, though he did also become the Silver Ranger in that show. Xenowing has a really interesting introduction arc with Doomwing and all the stuff involved with that, which actually inserted a little bit of betrayal and an evil ranger momentarily into the mix. Even after being freed from Doomwing, he had to relearn how to trust a team and not just work on his own. It was a really well-written and interesting introduction arc. The only problem with Xenowing is everything after that. After that, he was kind of just there. And a giant blue Birdman should not just be there. The best example might be that final episode, Here Comes Heximus. Xenowing doesn't even have a line. He's just there. I would have loved to have learned more about his backstory, his history, what led him to being Keeper's apprentice, etc. Speaking of Keeper, there's someone else that would have been nice to know a lot more about. Keeper was the mentor of the Dino Charge Rangers, offering moralistic wisdom that more often than not was a one-sentence statement of the episode's moral. Keeper was very even-keeled throughout the series, but to me, we should have seen crushing guilt in him, as his actions in the distant past resulted in the extinction of an entire species. Keeper should have seemed a lot more desperate to gather the 10 Energems, knowing that their power would give him a chance to go back and make things right. In the episode End of Extinction, we learn that Keeper is actually a title, as he confers it on Heckle as well. So in the end, we don't even know this dude's name. It would have been great to get a ton more backstory on Keeper. What organization created the Energems, who tabbed him to keep them safe, and how that works, just all of that stuff. In the end, Keeper was just around to be this show's Barney the Dinosaur. Every team of heroes must have a rogues gallery to fight, and Dino Charge had more than its fair share of villains. The head bad guy on Dino Charge is Sledge, an original villain bounty hunter who's after the Energems as his ultimate score. His space rock collection is what ended up causing the extinction of the dinosaurs before that was retconned, and most of these series are his 65-million-year-old quest for revenge against Keeper and his ultimate prize, the Energems. Sledge actually really strongly reminded me of Master Xandrid. He was very loud and strong and gruff, but he hardly ever did anything, most of the time just staying on the ship. The few times he got off his butt and got into battle, he was effective. He was just lazy. Sledge is defeated and supposedly killed at the end of the first season when his ship crashes on Earth. But to be honest, I found that pretty weak sauce at the time, seeing as the entire main crew was on the bridge of the Sledge 1 when it crashed, but supposedly he was the only one killed? He pops back up right at the end of Dino Supercharge for one last master plan. Except that it wasn't a master plan at all. It was something he literally stumbled on, the eggs. Even his ultimate planet-destroying plan was actually a backup plan to the first idea. Sledge never had an ongoing master plan. He just kept trying things until one finally backfired and took him out instead. The other frustrating thing that Sledge had to deal with was his fiancée, then wife, then fiancée for a second, Poisandra. She was not only a frustrating character, she added a frustrating aspect to Sledge's character, his ambivalence over her. Sometimes he was a perfect, loving, doting partner doing the cute little baby talk schnook'em-wook'ems thing with her. Other times he was clearly annoyed and frustrated with her and wondered why he was bothering with her in the first place. I think it was attempting to reflect a reality in relationships, sometimes good days, sometimes bad days, but it was far too light switch and there was no pattern to it. Poisandra herself added very little to the show, actually. There were a couple of times that she was inspired to do things on her own. She had one or two good plans, but in the end she was just there to be Sledge's arm candy. In thinking about this, I thought it would have been really nice to have had the two break up for a couple of episodes and have Poisandra try a few plans completely on her own, with only Curio at her side. When I wrote that last sentence in the script, it actually reminded me of Curio's existence. Curio added absolutely nothing to the show, and I'm not even sure why he was necessary. I don't really remember the use of any Sentai footage that featured him strongly, and they took the one function that he had in the Sentai, that pumpkin-themed watering can that made the monsters grow, away from him. In the Sentai, he actually got I wouldn't really call it a focus episode, but some direct focus, and it would have been nice to see something like that here. In the end, it just comes off like they only added him to the show to sell his action figure. As this show has 20 primary characters, 10 Rangers, and 10 core villains, not to mention Keeper. So, no, because then people are going to go, you listed Keeper as a villain. That surge continued through both, well, no, not both seasons, because just the first season. For ease of segue, we'll now talk about James Navarro, Tyler's dad. 10 years before the events of the series, Tyler, James, Chris. For ease of segue, we'll now talk about James Navarro, Tyler's dad. 10 years before the events of the series, and helped to show kids that being into fencing and swordplay and things like that can be cool in modern times. But then fell into ice while saving his brother from the dreaded CGI saber-toothed tiger. Being found later by Ken. Coda did have some great moments. Farts. She was confident to the point of being dismissive, taking a while to... Ivan was kind of another walking a tribute, to be honest, very similar to Coda. He was trying to use his behaviors in the modern day led to some silly moments. He was brave and heroic, of course, being a knight, but using those knightly ways in the modern day led to some silly moments.